Let's start by putting the key in the on position and putting the shifter in neutral. Now we can make our way under the hood to the negative battery terminal. Use an 8mm to loosen it and remove it from the battery. Make your way back inside the passenger compartment. We're going to come to the lower kick panel underneath the steering column. We have to remove the plastic. To do that, you're going to find two 7mm headed bolts. Now once you have both of those out, move along to the hood release latch. Go ahead and pull on that. Underneath that, you're going to find two more 7mm headed bolts. Remove the pair. Now we can carefully grab onto the plastic. I'm going to grab onto this and I'm going to try tugging it away from the lower aspect of the dash. Go ahead and give that a quick inspection and set it aside. Now that we have that off, let's continue on by removing this metal plate. To remove this, you're going to find 5 8mm headed bolts. Let's remove all of them. Set that aside. Now let's move along to this area right here. We're going to start removing the 3 Phillips head screws from this hole here, here, and all the way over on the driver's side. Now I'm going to reach up along the driver's side of the steering column and I'm going to tilt my steering wheel down as far as I can. Now I'll use a trim tool and I'll carefully separate the 2 pieces of the clamshell. Go ahead and grab this. We'll carefully pull it out of here. Just give that a quick inspection, set it aside. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove this area here. This is the adjuster for the tilt of the steering. Go ahead and take that off of there, set it aside. Grab the lower clamshell, remove it from the steering column. Now let's have a peek underneath the steering column area. We're going to come over towards the passenger side and start disconnecting our wiring harnesses. We'll start with this green one. Press on the little locking tab there and separate the 2. Now for this center one, you're going to have 2 locking tabs, one on either side. Gently separate them and remove the wiring. We'll move along to this one. Now let's move along to our overdrive switch wiring. Just carefully get in between here and separate that as well. Quick inspection. We can move along to this wiring right here. For this one, it's going to be easiest to separate after you remove it from its mounting bracket. Up along the top here, there's a little push clip. Just carefully get in between there with something that you can pry with. To separate this, there's a rectangular tab where my thumb is. Go ahead and squeeze that and separate it. Have a little peek. Set that aside. Now let's come to our shift indicator bracket. You're going to find that you have a 5.5mm bolt that holds it in place on the steering column. Go ahead and remove that, and then we'll remove our red cable from the shifter. Moving along to the driver's side of the steering column, we're going to have to remove this wiring harness from the lower aspect. Right in here, there's a 7mm headed bolt. Remove it. Now we'll use our pick. We're going to come over to this wiring harness. There's a tab on the forward side of this. You can't see it, but generally if you just grab it with the pick, gently get in between, separate the tab, you should be able to pull this down. Continue on with a trim tool or a prying device. We're going to go ahead and separate the wiring from this metal bracket. Now we're just going to make sure we have the steering wheel in the locked position. Let's go ahead and take the key out of here. Grab that steering wheel. Make sure you hear it click in so it cannot turn. Now let's make our way underneath the steering column all the way to where the steering shaft goes down and through the firewall. You're going to find that the steering shaft has a 10mm pinch bolt that goes straight on through it and it holds it to the steering column. We need to remove that pinch bolt and then slide the steering shaft off of the steering column. To get this off of here, I'll give it a couple loving bonks with a pry bar and a hammer. Now this part's going to be a little bit harder to access. You want to make your way right inside this area, and then what you want to do is find this. You can go ahead and carefully pop this off of here using a prying device, such as maybe a trim tool or even a screwdriver. It should pop off fairly easily. Give it a quick inspection, make sure it's still reusable. Now let's move along to this area right here. You're going to find a metal bracket, and if you follow it to either end, you're going to find a 13mm headed nut. Let's remove the pair. For this last one, I'll make sure I'm holding the bracket. Go ahead and remove that bracket. And now we're going to take one of our mounting nuts and we'll just start it back on the mounting stud. Now let's move along the steering column to this crossbar. On the forward side of the crossbar, on either side, you're going to find another 13mm headed nut. For the one on the passenger side, we're going to go ahead and loosen that, remove it, and then just put it back on a couple threads. After that, we'll move over to the driver's side, fully remove that one, and leave it off. All right, now it's time for some heavy lifting. Go ahead and grab onto that steering column and lift it up. Remove the forward nut that you left on there a couple threads. Now we can just carefully lower this down so we can gain access to our last mounting point for the shifter cable. To get this out of here, I'm going to use a pick and something that I can reach in here to push on this with. The reason for the pick is because down underneath where the cable goes into the bracket, you're going to find a hole. Use the pick, press it in, and then go ahead and slide the cable out of here by pressing it forward. Let's carefully grab this and remove it from the vehicle. Now with this over on the bench, we have a nice clear view of our bracket and of our bushing. To get this out of here, we're going to have to remove these two bolts and these two bolts. To do that, we'll use a T30 Torx bit. Now with the bracket off of there, we can continue on to this area right here. I'm going to use this pick as a prying device. I'll gently pry this up. Obviously I don't want to damage anything else, but the next thing that I'm going to do is carefully get underneath here and separate it. Just get the bushing right off of here. Now at this point, we have this one completely off of here. If you were doing them as a pair, because there's one right here as well, before you went ahead and took off the bushing, you can just go ahead and take off this side as well, pull this up far enough to remove both of them. For the video, we only need to show you one. The process would be pretty much the same for the other. Just go ahead and clean this down as much as possible. The next thing I like to do is use a little bit of lubricant. I'm going to come right around the shaft area here where that bushing is going to sit. Obviously I can only get the top area, and that's fine. I'll show you why. Now we'll take our brand new bushing. You'll notice that there's a slot on it that makes it so you can go ahead and pop it right over this. We'll do that now. Now I can just go ahead and work this around a couple times. That's going to work in the grease for me. I'll take a little bit more lubricant, put it on this area. Press this down into the proper position. Install our brand new bracket. Thoroughly clean and inspect our mounting bolts. Go ahead and start each of them in there. All right, so let's go ahead and put this back in the vehicle. Looking inside under the dash, you can see that we still have one of our mounting nuts on the far right stud. We want to leave that on there, so as we put the steering column in, we can rest it there. And then we're going to continue on to our cable. As you slide this in, be very careful for all of your wiring and cables that are located behind this area. All right. So I have it resting on that one nut. Now I'm going to move along to the cable. I'm going to slide it back into its bracket and then lock it on. Now I'm going to reach under the dash. I'll grab my cable. I'm going to slide it into the slot and try to make sure I lock in my little piton. There we go. I heard a little click. Now I'm going to grab onto it. I'm going to try as hard as I can to pull it out of there. I want to ensure that it does not fall out. It's super important. Now we can take that other piece and we'll put it onto its lever. Press that right on. You can use a pry bar or your thumb. Once it's on there, of course, give it a tug. Once again, it needs to be secure. Let's lift up that steering column. Now I can start putting on my mounting nuts. I'm going to start with the far forward driver's one. Get that on there a little bit, leave it loose. Now we'll go ahead and tilt up the steering column here. We'll line up the mounting bolt holes. Now I'm going to hold that up, I'll start my bracket on there, and then start on each of my mounting nuts. Now while that's still loose and we can wiggle it around, I'm going to continue on with the steering shaft. I'll line it up and slide it up and onto the steering column. Now the next thing we're going to do is take our pinch bolt. If you're not replacing the pinch bolt, it's important to at least make sure you use some blue thread locker. Go ahead and slide it right through here. We'll bottom this out, and then we're going to torque this to 25 foot-pounds. Now we can tighten all of our mounting nuts that hold up our steering column. Let's continue by reattaching our wiring. We'll start with this large one, and then snug up your 7mm headed bolt on the driver's side. All right, so right there it bottomed out. I'm just going to take it a little bit further just to make sure it's snug. Of course, I'll give every electrical connector a tug once I feel as though I have it connected in. Now let's move along here. We'll reconnect in our overdrive switch. Got a nice click there, give it a tug. Now we're going to re-secure this. Just go ahead and slide that right up into the bracket. Now we can come over towards the passenger side. We'll continue over here. Green to green. Get that one in there. Let's get this large connector in here. Give it a nice tug. Resecure it. Let's get this little 3-wire connector reconnected as well. Now let's continue on to our indicator wire. We're going to take this and we'll put it right up over the hook. There we are. Now we'll bring the indicator bracket down and put it onto the steering column. After that, we can put in our 5.5mm bolt and snug it up. Now we can make our way above the steering column to the dash. We can see exactly where the shift indicator is. Now, of course, at this point, you want to match up the indicator to whichever gear you're in. For us in particular, we have this vehicle in neutral. So all I want to do is go ahead and turn that little cog until my indicator is right over the N. After that, I'll continue shifting into each of the gears and make sure it lines up perfectly and adjust accordingly. Turning it this way, you can tell it's moving away from the N. I need to go the other way. At this point, I have it pretty much directly in the center of the N. You don't want to stop here. Like I said, go ahead and test all of the gears and make sure it lines up. Perfect. Now we're going to take the tilt rod and start it in there a few good threads. We don't need to tighten it yet because we will be removing it. Once it's in there, go ahead and give it a tug and tilt your steering wheel down. Let's put on the upper clamshell. Let's make sure we line up this area here. It should want to slide right down. Do the same on the other side. That was easy. Let's remove that tilt lever again. And now we can reinstall our lower clamshell. As you bring this up, you want to make sure your tabs line up with their alignment points. Once you feel as though you have them lined up, continue on with putting in your 3 mounting bolts. Once they're all started, snug them up. Go ahead and put on your tilt knob again. We'll screw this in by hand as far as we can, then we'll go ahead and cover it with a rag and give it a little snug with some pliers. Let's get this metal protective plate on here. As always, line up all of your bolt holes, start in all of the bolts, and then snug them up. Now we can put on our lower trim panel. Looking at the back side, you're going to find that you have pitons that protrude out from either side of it. Those need to fit into their corresponding holes in the dash. Go ahead and wiggle it around until it feels like it lines up and press it in. Make your way under here and start in both of your mounting bolts on either side. We'll leave those loose and we'll continue on to our hood release. Get this lined up, I'll go ahead and start in both of my mounting bolts. After I have both of these started, we'll snug all 4 of the lower bolts. Let's go ahead and reconnect our negative battery terminal and make sure it's nice and snug. Okay friends, we got our steering column back together. Of course, now at this point, you're going to want to make sure that you test its functionality one more time. Put the key in the on position, run it through all the gears. After you're sure that it functions properly, go ahead and put it back in park, turn off the ignition. Start it up, run it back through the gears. As you get into reverse, make sure it starts backing up. Put it in drive, make sure you go forward. Aside from that, go ahead and take it for a road test, and of course, I recommend checking your alignment. Thanks for watching.